Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Am I audible to everyone? Okay. So, today, on the afternoon of a Sunday, on a warm Sunday there in India and other places also, I'm joining you from Melbourne. And I welcome all of you here Sarah, Aditi, Vishnu, Sachin, Mukla, Prateek. So, let's wait for some time as in till the time we can talk to each other so that remaining people can also join us so that more and more people are there with us and it'll be a live wonderful session. Yes, people are joining with us and today the topic is really interesting and it's not only for the researchers, specifically researchers. It is not only for them important. However, even if it's any anybody is there from the academics and is looking forward to write a paper or conduct a study research project, so that will be interesting for them as well. Okay, so let us start and let us have a look on what we have in store with us today. So this webinar is organized by research graduate and they are the um, one of the fine consulting company, research consulting company based in India, and wherein you can have your topic selection query or review paper writing, statistical analysis query to be done, and we have all the experts with us, and it is a one-stop solution for all of your research queries. So in any which ways you have anything where you find yourself stuck, where you find yourself um, not proceeding with your research appropriately, so then you should contact research graduate at that time. So when it comes to contacting research graduate, the details are there in front of you. You can send them an email id info@researchgraduate.com. The WhatsApp number is there flashing on your screens, and the website is researchgraduate.com. Okay. Now, coming to the webinar structure, this webinar structure is 90 minutes or so. So, primarily, it depends upon the uh, topic which we are in there in hand. So, not necessarily 90 minutes, it can exceed 90 minutes as well, which is then being followed by the Q&A session, which will be of 30 minutes. And obviously, again, there's no time foundation till the time you guys have your queries sorted. The Q&A will be there. When it comes to PPTs and certificates and recording for the webinar, it'll be sent on your email ID. Okay. And just don't worry about recording and don't worry about the certificates. Everything will be shared to you on your registered email ID. Just make sure that you are registered with the right, correct email ID on which you can receive all the material with you. Then please ensure that you have a better video quality of the standards of 720p on YouTube, so that you do not experience any glitch. Specifically, those the ones who have joined from the phones, particularly to them, I would request that if it's possible for them to switch to the screen, please make sure to switch it, else just to increase their video quality, because you might can have an issue with the video. When it comes to internet issue, today also at my part of the world we are having certain internet glitches, so you might see there are certain glitches from my end as well. So sincere apologies in advance for that only. All right. So let us, begin with the webinar for today. Now, today, what we have in store to discuss it, what is a research design? Okay. Now, basically, when we talk about research design, it is the idea, it is that plan with which you investigate about your research queries. Okay, I will try to uh, you know discuss in a very simple language to all of you so that all of you can understand that when you talk about a research design, it is how you will proceed, how you will progress with your research plan. Okay, now let's talk like this. So, there is nothing on the screen which is you are missing, just listen to me. When we progress with any kind of research, okay, whenever there is any kind of research, we always start with a research questions. We always start with a set of research questions with us. Okay, so our aim with that study, irrespective it is a qualitative one or a quantitative one, our aim with that study is to find out what are the probable answers for those questions. Okay, now when I say what are the research answers for those questions, or what are the answers for those questions, I mean to say that in what ways, how I will plan my study so that the appropriate answers can be found out. For example, any one of us who is there progressing the PhD. Okay, so we always take one problem in hand, that this is something which is missing in the literature. This is something which the data about which is not there in the literature. So my study will be on this. It can be certain relationship and factors, variables. It can be certain theory missing. It can be an absence of a definition, appropriate concrete definition. It can be identifying the factors. It can be any, right, depending upon your own study domain, research domain. Okay, so when we have that research problem, we proceed with coining the research questions for it. Okay, now when it comes to structuring those questions, now the main aim of conducting that research becomes to find out the answer. So depending upon whether our study will be qualitative or it will be quantitative, we choose our research path. Okay, now how will we proceed on that research path? That how will we collect the data? How will we analyze the data? How will we investigate about the probable theories or missing factors? All this comes under research design. So starting from your type of study, how will you proceed with data collection, what kind of sample you will choose, what will be the sample size, what will be the analysis technique, how will you analyze the data, it all comes into research design. Okay, now next thing comes that whenever you are going for a study, you might come across or find for coining hypothesis for yourself. Okay, and you do. Now, there's a question that many of the researchers comes, that that not all the studies have in the literature have been there with the hypothesis. That's correct. Okay. Now, here what I'm trying to tell you is that when you have a hypothesis and you are trying to find out their operational implication, now whether these hypotheses are true or not, that comes under research design. When you are finalizing the research hypothesis by the end of the study, that also you have done with the help of research design. Okay, so in a nutshell, if I tell you what all will be the setting of your research, your research plan, it will be qualitative, quantitative, the location, the techniques, the methodology of adopting as in the research study, solving out the research questions, collecting the data, and it will be longitudinal or cross sectional, we'll be talking about it. And how will you analyze? This all is research design. Okay, so there is a quick tip which I would like to give to students specifically who are progressing with defending their research synopsis quite in some time. There can be questions from the examiner that explain your research design. Okay, so there you will start with your purpose statement, problem statement of the study. Moving on to your research questions, moving on to your research methodology, in which setting your study is, okay, how long you will take to complete the study, as in uh, how long to data collection, then analysis, then you may also talk about literature review timeline, that also how will you analyze the data. All that you are supposed to tell the examiner, okay, when you are defending it. Okay, so this is primarily the research design. So, further into its explanation, so it is, I'm sure that by far now you must have understood that research design is primarily that framework which you gives to your study, which you tells in your study that on the basis of these techniques, on the basis of these methods, my study has got the answer of the research questions which we had in starting. Okay, so that's a research design. Now, here, what you will tell, like I told you in advance, that what kind of methodology you have, how will you collect the data, what are your research problem, research questions, your objectives, how will you analyze the data, then you will collate the information and you communicate the information. All these are essential elements. Now, always remember, your research methodology, your research methods becomes a part of research design. So when somebody is telling you to tell the research design, you will start with telling your problem statement, your questions, your objectives, then carry on to your methodology. So, on what basis you decide that methodology derives from your research problem, your research objectives, and your questions. So, that also needs to be explained when you are deciding your methodology. Okay. One more thing that I am sure all of you must be aware of this, that when you decide your methodology, because these questions we often hear, that when you decide your methodology, one thing needs to be taken care of, that that methodology is decided on the basis of your research objectives. What exactly do you would like to find out? So your research objectives gives you an idea about what kind of data collection tool, what kind of data analysis tool will be chosen so as to find out the concrete answers. Okay, so that always take care in mind. Okay, now why there is a research design? So when you say what is the function of research design, now this might sounds little theoretical to you. However, this is very important when you are defending your research project, particularly. It can be your synopsis, it can be your PhD as well. Because somewhere or the other, these functions gets converted into questions of the examiner which you need to answer. Okay, so you need to know, you need to understand that why my research design is there and what are the probable ways by which I can understand the function of my research design. Now, how will the study population be identified, like to whom you want to, on whom you want to conduct this study, from which you will take the sample. How did you identify that population? How do you how was you be sure that this is the population you want to work on? Okay, will a sample or the whole population be selected? I mean, you will derive a sample out of it. If the population is too large, if the population is small, you can take the whole population as a sample only. So this needs to be answered by you in your thesis also, in your examiner, in your defense answer also. Okay, if when you derive the sample size, when you know who's your sample, how will you contact them? There'll be a personal interview, there'll be a telephonic interview, there'll be questionnaire sent to them. All these needs to be understood. How will you take the consent? I mean, that's a very very important thing. I mean, and this also comes into under research ethics, that, and specifically nowadays, this is being given very high importance, that whomsoever you have selected as sample, are they been told that they will be participating or they will be sharing their information for such and such research, their consent has been taken or so, you know. An examiner might can ask you that how did you take their consent, what method of data collection you used and why. So why this, why not this. Also always remember that every individual have their own research acumen. So your examiner might say that why did you choose focus group, why did not you choose personal interview. So you need to be able to answer this, that why personal interviews. Okay. And it's not necessary that you always write that why you didn't choose the other methods in your work, but you should write this, that why did you choose this particular method on which you're working. Okay. And the same way you need to answer this also in your defense. All right. In case of interviews, where you will conduct the interviews, how the ethical issues will be taken care of, like ethical issues like no biasness, or revealing the identity of the respondents only when they are given the consent or not. All these things, imagine these functions as the questions coming from your examiner, and make sure that these questions are well answered in your thesis or research project as well. Okay. Because specifically, as I told you earlier as well, that categorically the ethical issues are being placed very high importance these days. Okay. All right. Now let's understand the various ways of research design establishment. Under that, the first is theory of causality. Now, theory of causality, what does it mean? When you say that there is a study, okay? Now, when you say there is a study, so uh, in that study, you are understanding or studying certain factors. These factors are called as variables, okay? Now, under this theory of causality, what you are doing is whenever there is a change in one variable, it will bring in the change of another variable. Okay. Now, these variables are those, like I told you, that these are those factors which you study in your research. Okay. So, if there is a change in X, it will bring the change in Y. Okay. There is a change. Okay. Now, there are three conditions to establish causality. Now, three conditions to establish causality means if these three conditions are there in your research static, you may go for theory of causality. First, these variables need to be associated. Okay, as in there has to be some connection with them. Second, variation in the independent variable before variation in the dependent variable. Okay, now it means that the independent variable identified by you in the study should change first, then it will cause the change in the dependent variable. Okay. Third means is that the independent variable precedes the dependent variable in variation. Okay, it's the same thing what I said in the second point. Okay, so that's the theory of causality, Vanside. Now, theory of causality and research design. Theory of causality primarily tells you that there is a relationship or there is an association in independent and dependent variable. Okay. So if one will change, it will change the another one automatically. Now let's understand theory of causality and the research design. For instance, types of counseling services, like which type of counseling service is being given, is an independent variable. There is a study which is talking about that there are some extramarital problems, or to what extent the extramarital problems are. So the study is about the extramarital problems. Okay. In that, counseling service are being given. Okay. So what all kind of counseling services are being given? They are independent in nature. Okay. So irrespective whatever the problem in whatever marital problems are there, they are not causing any change in counseling services. However, These counseling services are sorting out the marital problem. So that's how counseling services are independent and marital problems are dependent. So if there is a counseling service, there will be sorting out of the marital problems. Understand this, right? So that's why counseling service is independent, marital problems are dependent. Okay. Then counseling services given on the study population, which has the extent of marital problems, which is dependent, which we just understand. Now, in this series of independent and dependent variables, there are some extraneous variables as well. Now, these extraneous variables are basically those variables which the researcher does not include in the study and they come on its own during the course of the study. Now, for instance, there is a couple who is having an who is having a marital problem and they're undergoing the counseling services. However, there is no change in the issue in their marriages. But there is a self realization coming in either of the couple, either of the husband or wife, which may sort out their problem, which is definitely not through the counseling service. It is self realization. Probably during the course, they become parents. Okay. Probably because of their friends and family, they want to give a second chance to their marriage, or they have some improvement in the economic condition, or they have some decreased conditions in their finances. All these things have nothing to do with the counseling services. Okay, they are coming during the course of their marriage, which will give an impression on the marital problems. Either these extraneous variable can increase the marital problems or it can decrease as well. Okay, so these are those variables which definitely the researcher is not studying, but they are coming during the course of the study and they do cause a change in the dependent variable, which is called as extraneous variable. Okay, now when we talk about the changes in dependent variable, it may be because of three types. Change in the dependent variable, it is because of change in the independent variable, also because of extraneous variable, and we also say sometimes, not always, change by chance. However, this is always sure. These variables might or might not come similarly by this. Okay, so when you talk about the change in dependent variable, definitely it is by independent variable. It may or may not be because of extraneous variable and by chance. Okay, all right. Now let's understand with one more example, teaching model and comprehension. So what is the level of comprehension with different teaching models used? We have different population with us, like we have group A, B, C as our study population with different level of comprehension with different teaching models of being used. Okay, so there are different teaching models being used on different groups having different understanding levels. Okay, all right. So this is the diagrammatic representation. Sorry, just a second. This is a diagrammatic representation wherein it has been discussed that how there is a change in the understanding of students. So this is level of comprehension. Automatically, this is a dependent variable on these models, which are independent. So if model 1 is being used to teach the students, it is creating a change in the understanding of the students. You getting my point? If teacher is teaching them by model 1, there is certain way of teaching. This certain way of teaching is creating certain elevation or decrease in the understanding of the students. So understanding or level of comprehension becomes dependent on model, teaching model. Now, there are some factors which may influence the understanding of students as well. That is how the student is motivated to learn. What is the quality of teacher? I mean, if the teacher is too good and the model is too weak, even then she will or he will, make the students understand very well. How the family is taking care of a kid's study, how the kind of company student have, even if the teaching model is really good, teacher is really good, but the friends of that students don't let that the students to study, the study will not happen, the understanding will not happen. So these are some extraneous variables which will, or which, can impact the change or the variation in the dependent variable, which is this. Okay, all right. The proportion attributable to the three components may vary. Now here, understand, when we are talking about the theory of causality, we are talking about the variation of the in the variables. Okay, in that change happening in the dependent variable, like I said, that there is definitely a change by independent variable, like the independent variable is causing a change in the dependent variable, that is for sure. However, how much variation is being caused by independent variable, that is not sure. Sometimes extraneous variables may cause larger change in the dependent variables, like for instance teaching model we talk about. So teaching model is the independent variable, level of understanding is the dependent variable, and motivation, family influence, peer influence is the extraneous variable. May not be that, if you say that level of understanding of the students is really high, it is, it's getting really important, may not be the chances that the teaching model being used is creating all those improvements. Maybe the teaching model is creating improvements, but not to that extent. It is creating changes to a limited one. However, leftover improvements are being caused by the extraneous variable, like motivation of the students, family influence, peer influence. So what proportion of variation in dependent variable is caused by dependent or extraneous? It may vary. Okay, it may vary. Now let me explain you the extraneous variable once more. That's what we have discussed already. All the, variables that can affect your understanding about the variation in the dependent variables, definitely they are not a part of the study as independent variable, but they occur. Okay, they are called as extraneous variable. Now, how can you control the extraneous variables? There are ways. Firstly, you can choose to eliminate the extraneous variable by random sampling. Okay, see, random sampling does not completely eliminate it. However, when you use random sampling, that you must be knowing that you use random sampling in a large population. Okay, so when you have a large population, you always go for a random sampling depending upon the nature of your studies. However, not completely removing these extraneous variable, with the help of random sampling, you distribute these variables between the groups. So it is not like that on a particular group, these extraneous variables are causing a very significant change as compared to another one. Okay, also through elimination or inclusion, you can also, eliminate or include. You see, it's your choice. You can progress with your study with extraneous variable as well, or you can improve also by, controlling these by elimination. That means you can actually hold certain of the extraneous variable if you are performing your study in the experimental conditions. Okay, so controlling is one way of controlling these or eliminating these extraneous variable in experimental settings only. Rest, you can also always go for a random sampling. Okay. Okay. So let's say one more example here. Suppose you want to study the impact of health education program on the attitude towards and belief about the causation and the treatment of certain illness among non-indigenous Australians and indigenous Australian living in a particular community. So there is a health program, and what is the attitude of the people, what is the belief of the people about the treatment of the cause of a certain disease, okay, about these Australians. So when you talk about attitudes and belief, they vary from culture to culture, okay. Studying these attitudes and belief for different groups like non-indigenous Australian and indigenous Australians definitely will not give a clear picture. So indigenous Australians is one different group, non-indigenous Australian is one different group. They both have cultural differences, and we want to study that what is the attitude of the people, what is the belief of the people towards the illness or treatment of a particular illness or why it is being caused. So this is quite obvious to understand that both these groups will have different understanding, will have different cultural beliefs, will have different traditions about treatment of particular illness or why does it cause. So here, if we, if we progress with eliminating this cultural variation by making sure that we select people or we conduct the study in such a way that the attitude or belief of a particular group is under study, then separately about the another one, there how at the last we can coordinate or we can progress by making the study as a comparative one, that how the attitude and the belief of the two groups chosen here in the study, indigenous and non-indigenous, differ from each other. That can be done, okay. Otherwise, if we do not do this, then cultural variation will act as a extraneous variable here, okay. All right, now let's talk about quantitative research design. Now basically, I'm sure all of you must be knowing about quantitative research. What exactly is it? So primarily, whenever there is a quantitative word mentioned, you always go by saying that there is a statistical data being collected. The performance of the analysis of on the data will be statistical in nature, mathematical in nature. That is quantitative research design. Okay, it also, when you talk about quantitative research, otherwise also that's a tip that your sample size is always large as compared to qualitative one. Qualitative researchers have smaller samples, quantitative researchers have larger samples, okay. So here in quantitative research, for understand this, your main focus is on getting more and more responses. You are not getting into the depth of those responses. Okay, just understand this. When you want to have more and more responses, that what majority of the people say, what is the percentage of people saying, then you are talking about quantitative research design. So you are not investigating that why they are saying so. So understand, it is quite practical that you can take a lot of responses. However, when it comes to investigating that why they are saying so, so if you go to all those people on understanding why they are saying so, this research will be endless, right? So that's why in quantitative research you are primarily giving attention to collection of more responses, why these responses are being given in such a way. You do not focus on that. So no emotional insight, no focused insight is being there on quantitative. I think this explanation will help you in deciding the nature of your study as well based on understanding your research questions, okay. Now one example is that when you conduct the survey to understand amount of time a doctor take when a patient walk into the hospital. Okay, so here we are just talking about that how much time a doctor take. So we are, because we want to understand a patient, we want to understand this with a patient satisfaction survey. So based on which we can ask that how much time a doctor is taking. Okay, so this can be a, or this is a quantitative research. Now if we go that why this doctor is taking so much time, so here we are focusing on one particular doctor. Now that investigation will be done through qualitative study, because reasons will come out. The patient's diagnostic history needs to be taken, the patient's treat ill because he's a specialist, so the patient comes to him or her are having a prolonged illness which takes times to diagnose or giving prescription. So here we are talking about the reasons which can be covered into qualitative research. Okay, all right. Let's take a 5 minutes break here, and then we'll quickly join back with the left of the webinar. Thank you so much. Okay, so we are back. Let's proceed with the webinar again. Now we discussed about the quantitative research. Okay, so there we understood that how the collect nature of the data to be collected defines the quantitative or the qualitative research. Okay, now some of the commonly used research designs under quantitative studies are based on different perspectives. They are number of contacts with the study population, the reference period of the study, and the nature of the investigation. Okay, so when we are talking about the study designs in quantitative research, the three different perspectives comes into picture. That is how many times the study population would be contacted, what is the reference period of the study, and what is the nature of investigation. So every study design is classified from these three perspectives. Okay, so then further investigation on the nature of the study is being done. Okay, now let's have a look on the type of study design. So when you talk about number of contacts, when you are talking about how many times the particular population will be contacted in the study, see, understand here what I'm saying. How many times the particular population chosen for the study will be contacted, categorized into definite different studies. If there is only one contact, if the data will be collected only once, it is called as cross sectional study. Okay, if the contact is twice, it is called as before and after studies. Okay, if the contact is three times, then the study is called as longitudinal study. That means if you are going back to the same population again and again over different intervals of time, that is called as longitudinal studies. Okay, now, then comes your reference period. So reference period, one is your retrospective, one is your prospective, and one is the combination of retrospective and prospective both. Okay, last perspective is on the basis of the nature of investigation. You may investigate experimental way, that is experimental. It can be non-experimental, it can be semi-experimental also. So what all you are seeing here, I'm scrolling my cursor again, this, these are the types of study design. Okay, these are the types of classification. Okay, now if somebody asks you, if your examiner asks you that why did you chose to have longitudinal studies, because your study demanded to collect the data by contacting the population three or more times. Simple explanation. Okay, all right. Now firstly, let's talk about the cross sectional study, as I already told you just once. Okay, so it is very simple. For instance, a cross sectional design is appropriate when you are trying to understand the attitude or probably the relationship between two variables, or some characteristics you want to find out. So basically, you are trying to find out something which is there in particular present. So the attitude will not change, right? The demographic characteristics will not change. Okay, the relationship between one variable and another variable you want to find out, which will obviously not change. So this kind of study demands you to collect the data once. So these example, on the basis of these examples, you can find out for yourselves that when you have such studies in demand, or probably when your nature of such study, when your research questions are like these, you definitely go for the cross-sectional studies. Okay, then comes your the before and after study design. Basically, the main the advantage which you can say that you can actually compare the situation. So if you want to, let's say, compare the situation, like what is the preference before, what is the preference after, and you want to test, in this case for example you want to test the influence or how effective a particular intervention or particular theory introduced, which kind of changes it brought, then you may go for the before and after study design. So here, when you talk about the before and after study design, you are actually trying to have a comparative analysis. You want to understand the effectiveness, you want to understand the change in the attitude, you want to understand the change in the behavior. So basically, you are conducting two separate cross sectional studies. Okay, so one is before the introduction of a particular program or an intervention. Another cross sectional is after the introduction of the program or the intervention. Okay. So here what you are trying to do is that you are understanding the difference, if there is any, before and after. Okay. All right. So then you will say that if such is the nature of your study, then you will say that before and after study design. Okay. Now, this is like that, you have a population. So this is the data before you collect the data before there is any intervention. Then the intervention is introduced. Then what is the change in the study population after the intervention? Okay. Then let's talk about the longitudinal study. So when you talk about longitudinal studies, the name itself says the study is little long. Okay. So always remember. So when you are conducting the data from the same population with certain interval of time, let's say, let's collect the data now, then after 3 months, then after 3 months, then after 3 months, then we will study the variations altogether. Okay, that means you're going for a longitudinal study design. Okay. Okay. Then lastly, the studies which are based on the reference period. As I told you, retrospective, prospective, retrospective, prospective, both. Now, what are reference period based studies or designs? Where you are particularly talking about a particular event or a problem, where you are trying to understand a situation, then either of the study designs can be chosen. Right? Either perspective can be chosen. Okay. Now that's up to you what kind of study you have. So when you're talking about the retrospective study design, basically here you are understanding a situation or a problem which has happened in the past. So whatever data you have in the literature, you call your respondents, whatever they tell you, that's the data for you. Okay, like how the evolution has taken, what is the use of a particular land, how how the situation of employment in that particular country during your time. That can be the retrospective study design examples. Okay. Then coming to prospective study design. Now when we are talking about the prospective study designs, you are basically talking about the future. Prospect, understand the word called prospect. Okay, so here you are depicting that what could or what's likely to happen in the future, or what, due to this problem, what might can be the face of this problem in the future. Okay, so because of this event or based on this event, what is the outcome in the future that you prospect. Okay, now for instance, influence of eating junk food on health, we generally have. What will be the scenario on employment after the rigorous migration, that can be help. And the counseling and marital problems, example we understood. Okay, these are prospective designs, wherein, see, now you can understand wherein you are talking about the past, what happened, that you're talking about a retrospective, where you are talking about what will happen in the future, as in, because of this, what will happen to this, what will happen to this. Prospective design. Okay, then come retrospective prospect. Now this is a combination of both. Now, basically, here what you're talking about is that certain data is collected retrospectively, that is on the basis of existing records starting from the past. Okay, now that data is with us, an intervention is there. After that introduction of the intervention, what will happen? That data is collected. So now you have both the data. You have past data also, influence data also. That is retrospective perspective. So in short, if I say the combination of both. So in one, you're collecting only the data which has happened. In one, you are collected after the introduction of certain intervention. What will happen? Both you will collect and then club. Okay. Then coming the study design based on the nature of investigation. So you have experimental, quasi experimental, and non experimental. So starting with non experimental first, it measures the outcomes before and after the program for participants. So there is no comparison basically. What was there before, what was there after? So there is no comparison. So when you're talking about experimental designs, just always remember you are comparing. So non experimental is clearly saying there is no comparison. Experimental, it's clearly saying so two different experiments for two different study participants group, and then you compare. One is given the intervention, one is not given the intervention. For example, one is given the home tuition along with school studies. One group of students is not given any tuition, only the school studies. What is the difference between level of understanding for both? That will be an experimental exam. The example where what is the level of understanding after the introduction of home tuition. Okay, so how much they were understanding before home tuition, how much they're understanding after tuition. Non-experimental. Okay, let's talk about quasi-experimental. Measure outcomes for program participants and non-participants without random assignment. So there is basically a group where there is, so there are two groups but there are no comparisons between them, like this. These are kind, so basically one is having an introduction. So what is the level of students with home tuitions understanding? What is the level of understanding in the students with no home tuitions? Okay, so here the level of understanding is being compared. Here there is no comparison. Here just before and after behavior is being recorded of the same group. Okay, all right. Now let's talk about study designs in qualitative research. So I hope you remember when I said qualitative research, small sample size, some small population, non statistical mathematical data collection. Okay, okay. So, what can be the study designs for qualitative research? Your case studies, oral history, you can conduct group interviews, you can have focus groups, you can have observations, you can have discussion forums. So data is collected with these ways. All right. Okay. Some other commonly used philosophy guided designs are also there. Now let me talk about either of them at least. So case studies where you are collecting the data about a particular organization, a particular region, or particular country. So a specific consideration is there on which you're collecting the data. Interviews, you all know. Focus group, I'm sure all of you must be knowing, where rather than individually going to all the respondents, you are calling them all in a group. The same questions has been given to all, and what is the difference of in their opinion? You as a researcher records them. When you talk about observation are basically when you are recording the behavior of the respondents just by not letting them know that you are actually observing them. However, participant observation is when you become a part of those respondents and they know that you're recording their behavior. That's participate observation, for instance. Okay, then we were talking about some commonly used philosophy guided designs. One is action research. Now, basically, when you talk about research in any which ways, this is basically a very famous action research model in change management. Also, if anybody is a management student or a management academician, I mean, who is taking change management module, they must be very well aware about this model, that is action research model. So, basically, let me tell you about action research model, in which you are researching you are researching and investigating that how a particular problem can be sorted out. Okay, this is basically action research. Let me explain you further that there is a question also, but I would appreciate, like we do always, that we will take the questions once the webinar is done, so that I do not lose the track of the discussion. Plus, but please do not forget to take a note of your questions. We'll answer them all. Okay. So basically, in action research model, what you are trying to do is you are trying to investigate on a problem's solution by the mean of the research. So you are doing, or you are introducing certain solutions to that problem, and how much that problem is being sorted with that action. This is the research. Okay, so you basically try to find out why, when, how the problem is being there, is being occurred, and what are the different ways of sorting out this problem. Okay, then is feminist research. So feminist research is basically, based on feminist concern acts, which are the guiding framework for feminist research, and it actually differs from traditional research by the main focus of these researches are the viewpoints of women. What does women think about, so definitely these research are trying to investigate or to remove if there is any power imbalance between the respondents and the researcher. So there is no, data is which is been hidden or been not been given properly. So these kind of research primarily aim on the removal of the gender biasness. Let's say, for example, if somebody wants to work on glass ceiling, okay, particularly where gender is the reason, then feminist research will come into picture. Okay, then lastly, the difference between qualitative and quantitative research designs. When you talk about quantitative research, the main idea, quantitative, the main focus, the main idea is to test your hypothesis. In qualitative, you want to develop those hypotheses, because you understand, in quantitative you have the numbers, so you can test the hypotheses are right or wrong. In qualitative, you have the data with you, with reasons, so that you can develop the hypothesis. Okay, here the statistical analysis is there in dominance. Here, summarizing of the data is dominance. What does the data actually hold in its meaning? Okay, so this is more of descriptive in nature. This is more, explained with the help of data visualization tools like graphs, the tables, the pie charts. They are called as data visualization tool. Okay, like I told you, quantitative always have a large sample size. Qualitative has a relatively smaller sample size. For instance, if you're going for a qualitative study, and then you want to interview the people, the minimum number of people you can interview, depending upon the nature, size in depth, can be 12. Okay, so this minimum sample size can also be accepted. Then you have here closed questions. Here questions are open ended, where you can investigate more. Okay, all right, so that's all for today's discussion. Let us take the questions now. Okay, Kedinets, if I'm pronouncing your name right, and I'm sorry for the wrong ones. How will you then document the behavior of the participants? Okay. Now, when you are talking about the participant in observations, you have certain criteria on which you need to collect the data, because participant observation is a way to collect the data. So what are you actually trying to take a note from their behavior? Let's say, for example, team collaboration. This is what you want to investigate on. So you have 10 people about which you are observing the behavior. Okay. So how they are collaborating with each other, are they collaborating, how they are collaborating, how they are helping there. So all these ways, these are preset. These criteria you will not decide once your study is started. These are preset, wherein you will then take a note of their behavior as it is what they are doing. What they are doing, you make a note of it. Always remember, when participant observation or observation, your biasness, your own understanding about the situation will not come into picture. Whatever is happening, you're making a note of it. Then after, you will segregate the data, then you'll analyze the data, summarize the data. But while taking note of it, it will come as it is. Okay. So can we have more questions, please? Thank you, Dr. Amit, for wishing you all the teachers here a very happy Guru Purnima. Can we have the questions, please? Guys, please feel free to, type in your questions. I hope, Cadinets, I have answered your questions. Okay. Like to know how to write the proposal in ethical clearance, please. Okay. Okay. Harshini's, when you talk about proposal, research proposal, if you are talking in reference to a particular university, the university release the template of the research proposal, that how your proposal should be aligned. If not, then you go for introduction, your research problem, your introduction, literature review. In that gap, then methodology will talk about your research problems, objectives, questions, slightly glimpse of it. Research problem is, you're not talking about findings here. Research problem is slightly shorter than your synopsis. Okay. When it comes to ethical clearance, so if you're talking in reference to the uh, if you're talking in reference to the any organization, you need to take permission from the organization in advance. Okay. Or if you are not taking the entire organization in reference, you need to make sure that the employees let the organization know that you're participating in such study and there is a permission letter from them. This you need to observe. So because all of you, please make sure that you cannot name any person, name any organization in your research without the consent. So even if you are let's say, if you say that uh, you are conducting quantitative studies, so the sample size is too much, too many participants are there, how it is possible to practically take the permission from everyone. So when you send them the questionnaire or survey, you write those lines that they are giving consent before filling out this. So those whosoever they are giving consent, they will carry on with filling out the questionnaire. Those who are not, they will not choose to follow it. Okay. So this ways you take it. Okay. Cadinets, when you talk about triangulation is primarily used when you want to compare. Then you use triangulation. Okay, when you want to compare the evidences, when you want to understand the variation in the data by comparing it by different theories or sources, then you use. Okay, thank you, Mr. Padmakar. Thank you, Rani. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. See, it's not difficult to decide what will be the nature of your research, unless and until you are too sure that what you exactly want to find out. Okay. Thank you, Ashini. Kumar have a question. I'm collecting numerical data of some independent variables and analyzing the effect of them on one independent. It is a purely a quantitative one. It is Kumar. It is a quantitative one. You are basically, you have chosen two or more independent variables and what variation they are causing in one dependent one. This is a quantitative one. Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Saya. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. See, I would suggest that the moment you come across with your research gap, the moment you are sure that my research gap is identified, you translate that. That's the procedure we follow. We have a research gap with us. We have identified that what exactly you want to work on. Translate that into your research problem. Okay. So once the research problem is done, is identified, is coined, then you uh, check that this research problem will how be converted into research questions. At that very point in time, you decide the nature of the study. It'll be quantitative or qualitative. For example, you want to understand the emotional insight of a school student graduating from primary school to middle school, higher secondary school. So the students who is graduating from grade 6 or 5 to grade 7, what is the emotional insight goes on in him or her? This is purely a qualitative study because you want to understand what goes on in the mind of the student at that transition. So that is purely a qualitative one. However, if let's say you want to find out that in this particular school, how many students choose to go to A or B or C middle school, it is quantitative. Okay, when you are not trying to find out the reason of anything in depth, quantitative. Just close your eyes, it's quantitative. And then you can definitely progress with the remaining research plan. So when you talk about Hashini, when you talk about the thank you, Dr. Kalpana. When you talk about the research proposal, make sure that your literature is too not elaborated, your introduction is too not elaborated. Spend time on your methodology. You may not choose to justify your methodology there. However, if you are writing a synopsis, the justification of methodology there has to be there in the synopsis. So smaller version is proposal, little elaborated is synopsis, and complete elaboration is given in the thesis. Okay, so this is the way you not and also one more thing to all of you, that at many places synopsis or proposal is used interchangeably. Okay, so just make sure that what is the word count. So generally a proposal is around 1500 to 1800 word. When you talk about this synopsis, it becomes 3000 word, 2500 to 3000 word, and definitely thesis you all know. So always make sure that what is the word count of the nature of the report which is being asked from you. What is the template, if there is any, from the institution where you are presenting or going to submit it. Okay, so these couple of things will help you identifying to how to structure your synopsis and proposal. Do not spend too much of time in writing literature, particularly for both these documents. Okay, so but that will give you a helpful insight, I think. Can we have more questions, please? I hope these days, what I can see is that universities are also changing the way any PhD thesis should be conducted. And with the onset of DBA these days a lot, so the professional students, those who are working and would like to pursue their research parallelly, they are preferring to choose go for DBA, which is also very talk of the very these days talk of the town. So you complete your course or you complete your research in 2 to 3 years. Generally, primarily, it has been 2 to 3 years. So which is very popular these days in US. Okay, so Kumar is asking about inductive and deductive reasoning. So when you talk about inductive reasoning, there in inductive reasoning, you are primarily drawing conclusions, you know, from specific. So what basically you have specific information and what does it mean? Okay, when you talk about the deductive reasoning, in deductive reasoning you primarily have the general information by and large. Okay, so the general information, what I mean to say, is general data. Okay, so then you make specific out of it. So in inductive you primarily have the hypothesis with you and then you test them and give the proper reasoning. In deductive you derive the hypothesis out of your theories. Okay, Sakshi, when you talk about literature review, so firstly, you need to be sure that what exactly you would like to conduct your thesis on research on. Okay, then on the basis of that, just go and identify the right literature review by scrolling on the journals, the cases, and also the relevant books. So, when you're talking about writing a literature review, it has to be structured. Firstly, an introduction is there, wherein you're talking about what is there in this section of literature review. Then there is a body of literature review in which you talk about the main definitions, you talk about the main models, you talk about the main theories, and then there is a conclusion that what exactly the overall chapter has and also your research gap. Okay, Yogita, when you talk about questionnaire, so firstly you need to have the research objectives in your hand, your variables needs to be identified, and then you simplify those variables in the form of questionnaire. So when you're talking about preparing a questionnaire, if you want to prepare it, designing the questions on the basis of the literature and the variables you have identified from the literature. If you want to adopt it from the previous studies, you can do that also. That you can same questionnaire used in any previous studies can be used to yours. If you want to design one yours, so on the basis of the literature, the variables identified, that you design your question and then you test the questionnaire. Okay, then you test the questionnaire. Sakshi, you mind that if you can elaborate your question, that what you want to know about literature review suggestion. I mean, when I say suggestion, so just don't restrict yourself to the free journals generally, because our literature is just restricted these days to Google and whatever there is available on Google. So what happens is that every source is not free, and we just get ourselves restricted to the free journals. I'm not commenting about the quality of that. However, it is quite understood that if any journal requires subscription, so the quality does vary. So please do visit your institute's library as well, because they will be having some free journal, some subscribed journals databases with them, and Google those, search within those databases. That also can be done. Ma'am, thank you, Aditi. Thank you so much. I didn't find any particular literature review for my research problem. How can I do it? Okay. Firstly, You coin your research problem when you have done your literature review. Okay, so we don't say that my research problem is there but there is no literature, my topic on which I want to work on is there, but the literature review is not sufficient or is not there. So you are yet to form your research problem based on your literature review. Okay. Now, if you do not have any particular literature review, or if you do not have the literature review in specific and too much of um, quantity, I would say that that means your problem is or your research area in which you want to investigate on is quite recent, very recent. Okay, so I would suggest that try to introduce a little tweak into your research considerations, which will give you a widened scope of literature review. Shashidhar, what is your suggestion for a new researcher? On which aspect you're asking? You need to elaborate on your question. Thank you, Aditi. Thank you so much. Just by tweaking a little bit of your research, domain to investigate on can help you a lot to have a um, widened scope for your literature. Yeah, that can help you. Any other questions anybody's having? Shashidhar, I would request you to kindly, elaborate on your answers, on your question, sorry. A question for review paper, review of literature, research, and methodology, whether to give or needed. For review paper, definitely, Mr. Padmakar, methodology would be given definitely. However, when you talk about research design, so as I told you, research design is all about, when you are having your research, discussing your research problems or research questions. So obviously, for review paper, see, basically for review paper, your methodology changes, but all these things are required. Even for review paper, you do talk about your methodology, you talk about your research design, definitely. Can there be inductive reasoning and quantitative method? Yes, absolutely. For even for your inductive reasoning, your quantitative methods are always there. Definitely, Kumar, definitely. Because you are testing the hypothesis in inductive reasoning, and that's what you do with the quantitative research design. Definitely. Please feel free to give your more questions, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Please feel free to write. Okay. Candidates, we use validity and reliability while we design the questionnaire on our own. So if we are adopting the questionnaire on some from some previous researches, so there is no need to conduct the validity and the reliability of the questionnaire. We do it when we um, design the questionnaire. Okay. रिव्यू पेपर पब्लिश कराने हेतु कौन सी डॉक्टर कल्पना, आपको अपना सवाल थोड़ा सा एलाबोरेट करना होगा. अच्छा, तो इसके लिए आपको अ, अपना डोमेन, आपका किस एरिया में आपका रिसर्च रिव्यू पेपर है, उसके अकॉर्डिंग आपको अपने जर्नल्स सेलेक्ट करने होंगे. सभी जर्नल्स रिव्यू पेपर पब्लिश नहीं करते हैं, तो आपको ये भी ध्यान रखना होगा कि मैं जिस जर्नल को कॉन्टैक्ट कर रही हूँ, आपको वो रिव्यू पेपर एक्सेप्ट करते हैं कि नहीं. ओके. Rani ma'am, please once again repeat how to apply project proposal. Rani, I did not tell you that how to apply for project proposal. I told you that what exactly needs to be done in a research proposal, particularly when it comes to word limit. It is generally around 1500 to 1800 words, and also your university or the respective institution gives you um, the template for the research proposal. Just make sure to follow it. Okay. So but डॉक्टर कल्पना, मैं मतलब आपने बताया, अपना एरिया बताया कि आप राजस्थान में झालावाड़ जिले से हैं, तो बेसिकली ये डोमेन मेरा पूछने का मतलब था, आपका रिसर्च किस एरिया का है. जगह से मेरा मतलब है, आप रिसर्च किस चीज़ के ऊपर कर रही हैं, उससे रिलेटेड आपको अपने जर्नल्स देखने होंगे. ये भी देखना होगा कि क्या वो जर्नल्स रिव्यू पेपर पब्लिश करते हैं कि नहीं करते हैं. थैंक यू डॉक्टर कल्पना, थैंक यू सो मच. गाइस, प्लीज फील फ्री टू टाइप इन योर क्वेश्चन. मेंटल हेल्थ, ओके, तो आपका एरिया है मेंटल हेल्थ. अब मेंटल हेल्थ के ऊपर आप अपने लिए जर्नल्स देखिए कि कौन कौन से जर्नल्स आर देयर ऑन मेंटल हेल्थ, और ऑल्सो सोशल वेलबींग, इमोशनल वेलबींग से रिलेटेड जो भी जर्नल है, मेंटल हेल्थ से रिलेटेड ऑब्वियसली जो जर्नल्स हैं वो आपके एरिया में पब्लिकेशन करेंगे. अब उस जर्नल के होम पेज पे जाके आप ये देखिए, क्योंकि वो जनरली मेंशन करते हैं कि व्हाट काइंड ऑफ पेपर वी पब्लिश, किस किस तरह के पेपर वो पब्लिश करते हैं. उससे आपको आइडिया लग जाएगा कि ये जर्नल क्या मेरा रिसर्च रिव्यू पेपर पब्लिश करेगा कि नहीं करेगा. आपको लगता है कि करेगा, तो आप उसके सबमिशन गाइडलाइंस को पढ़िए. क्या क्या उसकी गाइडलाइंस है, उसके अकॉर्डिंग अपने पेपर को तैयार करिए स्ट्रक्चरली, एंड देन सबमिट करिए. Guys, please feel free to type in your questions. If you do not have any questions, we can wrap up the webinar. And for the next webinar, you will be notified soon on how the testing of the questionnaire. Nishit, the testing of the questionnaire, it needs to be done with validity and the reliability. You need to have checked its validity and the reliability. Also, you can get it checked, the questionnaire, by a expert. Okay, with an expert also you can test the questionnaire. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. If no questions are further there, we can wrap up the webinar. And for the next one, you will be notified. So keep a check on your emails. What's the topic for the next webinar? And please join us on that webinar as well. We'll try to bring in the new and creative topics for all of your research progress and pursuit of your research interest. All right. Thank you for now and have a good day, the remaining weekend for you all. Thank you so much.